before time was measured and before the stars were named. There existed only the vast silence of eternity where gods and titans ruled in endless struggle. Among the high thrones of Olympus sat Zeus, the thunder-bringer, whose voice commanded the sky and whose power no mortal could dream to defy. Yet even he, the father of all gods, carried within him the burden of fate that no lightning could burn away. For once he loved a titaness named Metis, the spirit of wisdom and cunning thought, whose knowledge stretched beyond the edge of heaven. From that union came a prophecy whispered by Gaia herself, that Metis would bear a child greater than Zeus, one destined to surpass his rule. Fear seized the heart of the sky god, for even immortality trembled before destiny. Zeus, blinded by pride and terror, made a choice that would change eternity itself. He summoned Metis to him, her presence calm as the moonlight upon still water, her words filled with truth. As she approached, he smiled with deceitful affection, hiding thunder behind gentleness. And when she stood before him, he swallowed her whole, consuming wisdom to avoid its rise. The heavens shook, the oceans cried, and even the stars dimmed their light at this act. But Metis did not perish within the king of gods. She lived still, whispering, weaving, thinking. Inside Zeus's mind, she began crafting a form, an idea made flesh, a consciousness made divine. Time passed like wind over eternity, and the god of thunder grew restless. Strange dreams haunted him, visions of battle, strategy, and light too fierce for his mortal eyes to behold. The pain came suddenly, splitting the heavens in half. Thunder echoed through Olympus as Zeus clutched his head, roaring in agony. The gods gathered in fear, Hera, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Apollo, all watching their king tremble. Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, approached with his mighty hammer forged in the fires of the earth's heart. With one swing, he struck Zeus upon the skull, and lightning exploded from the wound. From that blinding brilliance came a sound, not of pain, but of birth. And from within the shattered light stepped forth Athena, radiant and fierce. She emerged in full armor, gleaming gold, with a spear in her right hand and a shield in her left. Her eyes glowed with eternal intelligence, sharp as truth and calm as order. She stood tall, unshaken, divine wisdom and war perfectly joined. The gods fell silent in awe, their gazes fixed upon this being who seemed both goddess and idea. Zeus, even in his pain, looked upon her with wonder, realizing that his fear had created perfection. Athena bowed her head slightly before him, not as a servant, but as an equal born from his thought. He spoke softly, thunder reduced to reverence. You are my mind-given form, the wisdom I could never hold. At that moment, the heavens rejoiced, and the muses sang songs that echoed across eternity. The clouds parted, and the light of the sun kissed her armor, marking her as a protector of reason. From her first breath, Athena knew her purpose, not to rule, but to guide. She was destined to stand between chaos and logic, to balance strength with thought. The winds bowed to her, the oceans whispered her name. Even Ars, god of war, felt his pride wounded by her presence, for she held battle not in fury, but in strategy. Zeus declared before all, "This is Athena, born of mind and might, goddess of wisdom, justice, and war." And so her legend began, not as a tale of conquest, but of clarity. From the halls of Olympus to the hearts of men, her name would become a beacon of intellect and courage. She looked upon the earth below and saw the mortals struggling in ignorance and fear. She pitied them, for they built their lives upon confusion and blind belief. She vowed silently to bring knowledge, to raise humanity from darkness into reason. But the path of wisdom is never smooth, and even gods are tested by the fires of destiny. Athena's gaze turned eastward, where cities rose and empires clashed. There she saw potential, the mind of man yearning to grow, to understand. And deep within her heart, an idea formed, a city devoted to her, a civilization built upon thought instead of blood. But before that dream could breathe, she had to prove her place among the immortals. Not all gods welcomed her birth. Ours, fueled by jealousy, whispered that wisdom had no place in war. Poseidon sneered, saying strength ruled the world, not intellect. Yet Athena remained silent, her calm more powerful than their rage. She walked among them, learning, listening, calculating. When Hera tested her with riddles of morality, she answered with truths that silenced even Olympus. When Apollo spoke of prophecy, Athena spoke of choice for knowledge, she said, was the power to decide one's own fate. In every challenge, she shone brighter. The gods began to see her not as a rival, but as a necessity, a force that brought order to their chaos. Even Zeus felt a strange pride as he watched her ascend among the divine hierarchy. One day, as twilight fell over the peaks of Olympus, Athena stood alone, gazing down at the mortal world. She saw kingdoms rise and crumble, kings fight for power, and poets dream of truth. Her heart filled with both sorrow and admiration for humanity's endless striving. She whispered to the wind, "I will be their guardian, their wisdom, their protector in battle, their guide in reason." The wind carried her vow across the earth, and the world stirred as if it had heard her promise. Owls circled above her, symbols of her eternal sight. The olive tree bloomed beneath her feet, marking her bond with peace and knowledge. And thus began the first spark of Athens, the city that would bear her name. But the story of her dominion over men and gods was only beginning. For the goddess born of thought would soon learn that wisdom alone could not tame pride, nor could logic silence the roar of fate. As the stars rose over Olympus, Athena raised her spear to the heavens, not in war, but in oath, to protect justice, to preserve truth, to fight ignorance wherever it grew. Her journey had begun, and the world would never be the same. The gods would whisper her name in reverence and fear. Mortals would pray to her for clarity in times of madness. Kings would seek her guidance before battle. Philosophers would write her spirit into every page of reason. And thus the mind of Zeus became the heart of civilization. Athena, the goddess who was not born of love or desire, but of pure divine thought. She was the flame of reason in an immortal world of emotion. And as her light spread across the sky, Olympus bowed to her brilliance. For in her, the gods saw what even eternity could not deny, that wisdom is power, and knowledge is immortal. The golden light of Olympus had barely faded from Athena's armor, when the murmur of envy began to echo through the halls of the gods, for no being, divine or mortal, could rise in brilliance without drawing the shadow of jealousy. Ars, the god of war, whose veins pulsed with fury and conquest, looked upon her with disdain. He saw not a sister in divinity, but a rival who dared to claim dominion over battle. To him, war was chaos, blood, and the roar of fire, not strategy, not thought. He despised the calm that shone in her eyes. To him, wisdom was weakness. Poseidon, too, lord of the seas and storms, felt his pride tremble before her presence. He, who commanded the oceans and the waves of the earth, could not understand the quiet power that resided in her gaze. He mocked her knowledge, saying, "You speak of peace, yet you were born armed. Is wisdom not hypocrisy wrapped in gold?" But Athena did not answer with anger. She smiled, calm, serene, and dangerous in silence. Her silence stung more than any insult could. Days turned into divine storms. The skies grew tense with rivalry. Zeus watched from his throne, his heart proud yet cautious. He knew that Olympus itself trembled beneath the weight of untested power. To keep the balance, he decreed a trial not of words but of deeds. He commanded Ars and Athena to prove who among them truly deserved the mantle of war's mastery. Ars, grinning with bloodlust, roared his acceptance. Athena bowed, eyes calm, voice steady. "I do not fight for pride, but for purpose." The challenge would take place upon the mortal realm, where men waged endless battles, where chaos thrived and courage perished. The gods descended upon the warfields of Phlegra, where Titans once fell, and where mortals still clashed for land and glory. The air was thick with smoke and iron, the cries of men echoing like the heartbeat of destruction. Ars stepped first onto the battlefield, and instantly the sky turned red. Every warrior felt his rage ignite within them. Blades swung faster, arrows flew truer, and the ground ran with blood. His laughter thundered through the chaos. To him, war was beauty. Then came Athena. She did not roar. She did not burn the sky. She only raised her hand, and the wind stilled. The madness of men slowed as if reason itself had touched their minds. Where Ars brought fury, Athena brought formation. Where he inspired slaughter, she gave them strategy. Soldiers began to fight not as beasts, but as brothers with a purpose, protecting, defending, surviving. Ars, angered by the change, charged across the field, his sword dripping with divine fire. Athena met him not with rage, but with reflection. She raised her shield, the aegis, crafted from the skin of a fallen titan, gleaming with the power of wisdom itself. His blade struck, but found no victory. The force rebounded, sending him stumbling backward as sparks danced between them. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, eternity held its breath. Ars shouted, "You fight without fury, without heart." Athena replied, "I fight with purpose. Fury blinds, wisdom wins." Her spear moved like thought itself, swift, silent, precise. Each strike was a decision, not an impulse, each defense a lesson. And as their divine battle raged, the mortals below learned. They began to see that order could triumph over chaos, that intellect could guide courage, that wars could be won by mind, not just might. Zeus watched from above, his thunder silent for once. He saw in Athena what the gods had never known: control. Ars, enraged, unleashed his last strike, calling upon the full wrath of battle itself. The earth cracked, mountains split, and rivers turned to flame. But Athena stood unmoved. She closed her eyes, whispering an ancient word of power born from her mother's wisdom, a word that even time could not translate. And with it, she unleashed light, not of destruction but of reason. The field fell silent. Ars dropped to his knees, the fire in his eyes dimming. He had not been defeated by strength, but by understanding. Athena lowered her spear and looked at him with neither triumph nor pity. War without wisdom, she said softly, is the death of all gods. The wind carried her words across the battlefield, and even the dying soldiers lifted their heads to hear them. In that moment, every mortal heart felt her truth, that courage without clarity is ruin, and power without mind is madness. Zeus descended from the clouds, pride flickering in his divine gaze. He raised Athena's hand high before all of Olympus. "Behold," he declared, "the true spirit of battle, the guardian of reason and protector of justice, the goddess who fights not to destroy, but to preserve." And thunder itself bowed to her name. From that day forth, mortals began to whisper prayers not just to Ars for victory, but to Athena for wisdom in war. She became the divine strategist, the unseen general in every just cause. Temples would rise in her name, poets would sing of her strength and mind. But even as Olympus celebrated, Athena's heart remained calm, untouched by vanity. For she knew wisdom's path was endless, and that true power lay not in triumph, but in understanding. As the sun set behind the peaks of Olympus, Athena stood alone upon the clouds, her armor reflecting the dying light. She gazed upon the mortal world once more, seeing not soldiers or empires, but the potential for greatness in thought and compassion. And she whispered to herself, "Let them learn, let them grow, for knowledge is the truest form of victory." Thus ended the trial, and thus began the age where wisdom ruled beside strength, and the name of Athena spread across heaven and earth. The winds of Olympus whispered her name across the world, Athena the wise and the war-born. Mortals lit fires in her honor, seeking her sight before every great quest. But wisdom was not given freely, it was earned in trial and truth. Athena's gaze turned toward the mortal lands, where courage flickered like uncertain stars. There she saw men who fought bravely, but fought blindly. She saw kings who ruled with might, but lacked mercy. She saw heroes who chased glory, but not purpose. And she knew her task was not done. Upon the island of Seriphos, a young man named Perseus prayed beneath the moon. He was poor, exiled, and mocked by those who saw him as nothing. But the gods had written his destiny in the constellations. Athena appeared before him, not in thunder or flame, but in light, calm and cold like a silver mirror. "Do you seek greatness, Perseus?" she asked. He knelt, trembling. "I seek justice, my goddess, to free my mother from the cruelty of kings." Athena's eyes softened, for in his words she heard truth. She touched his forehead, and a spark of divine clarity entered his mind. "Then you shall slay the creature born of shadows, Medusa, the cursed one whose gaze turns life to stone." Fear rippled through him. "How can I face what no man survives?" he whispered. Athena smiled faintly. "By seeing with more than your eyes, she gifted him the mirror shield, a reflection of wisdom itself. With this, you will not look at the monster directly, You will see her truth through reflection, just as wisdom sees the world. And so, with her guidance, Perseus set forth through deserts and darkness. Athena's voice guided his thoughts. When he faced the Gorgons, her power steadied his hand. The mirror flashed with her light, and Medusa fell. Justice triumphed where courage and intellect walked together. The mortal world rejoiced, never knowing that the common Perseus' heart was the whisper of a goddess unseen. But Athena's work did not rest with him alone. Far away, another warrior sought her, Heracles, son of Zeus. His strength was unmatched, but his temper burned like wildfire. Athena watched him destroy monsters with ease, yet failed to conquer his own rage. When he cried to the heavens for redemption, she came to him, veiled in starlight. Strength without control is a storm that devours itself, she told him. Let wisdom be your weapon. Under her guidance, Heracles faced his 12 labors not as punishments, but lessons. When he lifted the heavens for Atlas, it was Athena who steadied the sky upon his shoulders. When he cleansed the Augean stables, it was her intellect that showed him the river's path. In each trial, he learned what Athena already knew, that true victory was the mastery of one's self. Her teachings began to echo through mortal ages. She appeared not only to warriors but to builders, poets, and thinkers. In Athens, a city rose in her honor, white marble gleaming like dawn. The people named it Athens, the city of the goddess who gave them mind and civilization. Poseidon had offered them the sea, but Athena gave them the olive, symbol of peace, wisdom, and endurance. When Zeus judged their gifts, he smiled. For the sea rages and fades, he said, but wisdom endures forever. Thus Athens became her eternal symbol, the cradle of reason beneath her watchful eyes. From that city, she inspired philosophers who questioned the world, architects who carved beauty from stone, and warriors who fought not for conquest, but for cause. The mortal flame of intellect burned brighter than ever, and Athena was its silent keeper. Yet, not all praised her wisdom. Some gods still envied her calm power. Ours scowled at her name. Aphrodite sneered, saying, she loves no one, feels nothing. What joy is wisdom without heart? But Athena only smiled, for she knew emotion without reason was chaos. She walked among mortals unseen, her steps light as the breath of dawn. Sometimes she took the form of an old woman giving advice to a lost traveler. Sometimes a raven perched on a philosopher's window. Sometimes a whisper in a warrior's dream, teaching them restraint before ruin. Every age that followed bore her imprint. Her voice could be heard in the clanging of swords, in the ink of scholars, in the cries for justice. Her wisdom flowed through time, shaping nations, kings, and empires, and yet Athena remained distant, never seeking worship, only balance. For she knew that too much wisdom could become pride, and pride, even divine, was a poison that destroyed gods. So she waited, silent and still, watching her city thrive and fall and rise again. She saw the fires of war, the greed of rulers, and the fading of faith. And though she could not stop destiny, she could whisper to those who would listen. Think before you act. Learn before you rule. Remember before you forget. Thus Athena's legend lived not just in temples, but in thought itself. In every mind that questioned, in every hand that created, in every heart that sought truth over glory. And as the stars turned above Olympus, she looked down upon the earth, seeing the mortals she had shaped, the heroes she had guided, and whispered with divine certainty, wisdom is not born of gods, but of those who dare to learn. The golden halls of Olympus shone bright as ever, yet beneath their beauty stirred unrest. The laughter of the gods no longer carried peace, it carried vanity. Feasts grew louder, the thrones grew colder, and the stars above looked down in sorrow. For the age of wisdom was fading into the age of arrogance. Athena watched in silence, her heart heavy with foresight. She saw gods boasting of their conquests, immortals gambling with mortal fate. The balance that Zeus had forged was beginning to tremble, and at its core, envy began to burn once more. Ours, never forgetting his defeat, whispered venom into the ears of the gods. She preaches peace, but rules like a queen. He said, Athena's wisdom has chained Olympus. Others began to listen, even those who once admired her calm. For envy grows fastest in the hearts of the proud. Aphrodite smirked. She wears armor but knows no love. What kind of goddess leads without feeling? Hermes shrugged. Perhaps her wisdom is only a mask, one hiding her hunger for control. Even Poseidon, still bitter from his loss of Athens, muttered, "The sea forgets nothing, not even deceit." Athena heard their whispers carried by the winds, but she did not defend herself, for wisdom does not argue with ignorance. Instead, she turned to Zeus, her father and king. "O father of thunder," she spoke softly, "Olympus grows sick. Pride is the poison, truth is the cure." Zeus looked down from his throne, his eyes tired with centuries of command. He said, "The gods will always war among themselves, daughter. It is their nature." But Athena knew this storm was unlike any before. This was not war of power, it was war of principle, and she feared the gods would lose themselves long before they lost their thrones. One night, the moonlight bathed Olympus in silver silence. Athena wandered alone through the marble corridors, her footsteps echoing softly. The stars above flickered as if whispering secrets. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, cloaked in darkness. Deeper than night, it was Eris, the goddess of discord. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Wise. "Athena," she purred, "you see everything, yet you do nothing. Why let the world decay?" Athena replied calmly, "Because balance demands patience. Every truth must ripen before it is revealed." Eris laughed, her voice a chilling wind. "Then let me speed the harvest." She tossed a golden apple, gleaming with divine light, upon the banquet of the gods. Inscribed upon it were the words "for the fairest," and with that single act, Eris vanished, leaving chaos in her wake. The gods gathered around the apple like wolves around prey. Aphrodite claimed it for beauty. Hera claimed it for power. Athena, though uninterested, was drawn into the quarrel, for Eris had named her as one of the three divine contenders. Thus began the spark that would ignite the greatest conflict in mortal history, the Trojan War. But before mortals bled for divine pride, Olympus itself began to fracture. Accusations, deceit, and rivalry poisoned every feast, every council, every whisper. Athena stood among them, watching reason crumble. Her voice of peace was drowned by laughter and vanity. She turned away, heart burning with quiet anger. If wisdom could not heal Olympus, perhaps only consequence could. She descended to the mortal realm, her armor dim with sorrow. There she sought clarity among those who still learned, still hoped, still dreamed. On earth, she walked unseen among kings and prophets. She whispered to seers in Delphi, warning them that the gods' folly would soon touch man. She guided architects who built temples that could endure when Olympus would not. And as men looked to the heavens, she watched the skies darken. Meanwhile, above, Hera and Aphrodite plotted vengeance. They would not forgive Athena's calm refusal to bow. Eris's poison had done its work well. Olympus became a court of lies, alliances shifting like the sea. Even Zeus began to doubt those closest to him. When Athena returned, the throne room was filled with silence. The gods stared at her, not as sister, but as rival. Zeus rose, lightning in his eyes. He said, "Daughter, your wisdom divides more than it unites. The gods question your loyalty." Athena's gaze did not waver. "My loyalty is to truth, not to vanity," she said. Her words struck the air like thunder without sound. Ours drew his. Blade, truth, or ambition? Hermes whispered, "She speaks like one who would rule Olympus." Athena looked at them all, not with anger but disappointment. "You speak of rule, yet none of you can rule yourselves." Zeus lifted his hand, silencing all. "The storm has begun," he said, voice heavy as fate. "Let the winds of destiny judge who among us is right." And so, Athena was cast from Olympus, not in chains, but in exile of spirit. The golden gates closed behind her as thunder roared through the heavens. But as she fell toward the mortal world, she did not curse her father or her kin. She whispered, "Let them drown in their pride, and may wisdom rise again from their ruins." The world below trembled as her light descended upon it. Mortals saw her fall as a streak of silver fire, a sign, an omen, a promise. She landed upon a quiet hill near the city that bore her name. There she stood, alone but unbroken, her armor cracked but her spirit whole. She looked to the heavens, no tears, no fear, only resolve. For even cast down, Athena knew, wisdom does not die when power falls. It endures, waiting for minds brave enough to seek it. And thus, as Olympus drowned in its own pride, the goddess of wisdom began her next journey, not to rule gods, but to awaken mortals. The heavens had forgotten her name, but the earth whispered it in every wind. Athena, once the pride of Olympus, now walked the mortal world in silence. Her armor dulled, her crown gone, yet her spirit blazed brighter than ever. She had fallen not from grace, but from illusion, from a heaven that no longer knew wisdom. The world she landed in was weary. Cities crumbled from endless wars, kings ruled through greed, and the poor prayed to deaf skies. Athena walked among them unseen, cloaked as a wanderer in a grey robe. She carried no weapon, only a staff carved with ancient runes, a symbol of her knowledge. She came first to a village stricken by famine. Children cried for bread, their mothers wept into empty hands. A rich lord hoarded food within stone walls, guarded by men who feared hunger less than his wrath. Athena watched and whispered to a farmer who dared to question injustice. Truth begins when fear ends, she said softly. The man, not knowing she was divine, stood against the Lord. His voice sparked courage in others, and soon the people rose, not in rage, but in reason. They shared, they rebuilt, and from that moment, the village learned that wisdom feeds longer than grain. From there, Athena journeyed through lands unknown. She crossed deserts where men fought over water, jungles where kings ruled by superstition, and cities where gold was worshipped more than gods. Everywhere she went, she planted thought like seeds in the soil of human hearts. Some grew slowly, some died quickly, but a rare few, became forests of enlightenment. In the city of Argos, she found philosophers arguing about the stars. They sought answers, but fought with words sharper than swords. Athena entered their hall, veiled and humble. She asked them, "If you know the stars, do you know yourselves?" They laughed, until their eyes glowed with the light of creation. In that moment, silence fell and understanding bloomed. For true wisdom, they realized, begins with humility. In Sparta, she met warriors training for endless wars. They boasted of strength, of conquest, of never fearing death. Athena spoke to their general, her voice calm as still water. To fight forever is to forget what peace is for. The general frowned, but could not forget her words. Years later, when Sparta chose defense over destruction, her whisper had become their law. In Athens, her chosen city, she walked at night among its people. She saw the lights of thinkers, artists, and dreamers burning like constellations on earth. She smiled, knowing her essence still lived there. A child ran to her, lost him crying, clutching a broken toy. Athena knelt, repaired it with a flicker of divine light, and said, "Do not cry, little one. What is broken can always be rebuilt with patience." That child grew to be a builder who raised temples and bridges that would last 1,000 years. But even as she shaped mortal minds, darkness stirred beyond the horizon. Whispers from Olympus reached her ears. The gods had begun to fade. Mortals no longer feared as they once did. They prayed less and thought more. The age of divine command was dying, and the age of understanding was dawning. Ars raged. Hera schemed, and Zeus watched in silence as temples emptied. They blamed Athena, saying her wisdom had poisoned the hearts of men. But she knew this was not poison, it was evolution. Mankind was becoming what the gods never expected, free thinkers. One night, as stars scattered like silver dust, Hermes found her walking near the Aegean Sea. He said, "Athena, you have changed the world, but the gods are dying because of you." She looked at him, eyes calm. As eternity, "They are not dying," she said. "They are being remembered differently. The divine was never meant to rule, only to guide." Hermes sighed. "Zeus fears the world will forget us." Athena replied, "If they forget our names but keep our lessons, we will live forever." Hermes bowed, for even the messenger of gods could not argue with truth. When he vanished, Athena looked upon the waves, seeing her reflection ripple between sea and sky. She whispered, "Let wisdom be their light when gods are gone." Years passed, decades, centuries. Empires rose and fell like the tides. Philosophers debated her ideas, sculptors carved her image, poets sang of her justice. Yet none knew that sometimes, in the quietest corners of their cities, a woman in grey still walked watching, teaching, guiding. She taught rulers that mercy is strength. She taught scholars that questions are sacred. She taught children that curiosity is the first form of courage. Every act, every word reshaped mankind's spirit a little more. Then came the age of forgetting. The temples cracked, the statues crumbled, the myths became stories. But Athena smiled, for her purpose was complete. She had not built a kingdom of worship, but a legacy of thought. As the last marble pillar of her temple fell, a young girl picked up a fragment and used it to write upon the sand a word, an idea, a spark of knowledge. Athena, watching unseen, whispered, "From this, civilizations will rise again." And in that whisper, her essence became eternal, not bound to Olympus or the sky, but living in every mind that seeks truth and every heart that values justice. She was no longer a goddess of statues or songs. She had become something greater, the eternal voice of wisdom within the human soul. And though the clouds of Olympus drifted far, whenever the world faced ignorance or tyranny, a calm voice would echo through the ages, saying, "Think, learn, rise." Time moved like a quiet river, flowing past empires and kings, and though Olympus had grown silent, Athena's voice still whispered through the world. Her temples may have fallen, her name may have faded, but her wisdom became the pulse of civilization itself. The mortals she once guided had learned to think, to question, to build. They looked not to the sky for answers, but within themselves. And in that awakening, Athena found her truest immortality. The great city of Athens still stood as a living shrine, not in stone, but in spirit. There, philosophers gathered beneath olive trees, debating truth, justice, and the nature of being. They spoke her words without knowing they were hers. When Socrates asked, "What is virtue?" it was Athena's question reborn. When Plato wrote of the just city and the wise ruler, it was Athena's dream carved into human thought. And when Aristotle gazed upon the stars, seeking order in chaos, her light guided his reason. No longer a goddess of battle, she had become the guardian of intellect. Her wisdom flowed through scrolls, through ink, through the voices of those who sought truth over triumph. She had conquered not with the spear, but with the mind. Across the seas, other lands began to feel her unseen touch. In Egypt, scholars recorded the movements of stars and the laws of medicine, for Athena had whispered that knowledge heals more than prayers. In Babylon, astronomers traced the heavens and learned that the divine moves with precision. In India, sages sat in meditation, seeking inner peace, and Athena smiled, for she saw that wisdom wore many faces. But not all ages embraced her gift. There were those who feared knowledge, who silenced thinkers and burned their works. Dark centuries descended, empires fell. Libraries burned and ignorance spread like smoke. The flame of reason flickered weakly, trembling in the wind. Yet even then, Athena's presence endured. A hidden scholar in Alexandria copied ancient texts by candlelight. A teacher in Rome whispered philosophy to his students in secret. A monk in Byzantium preserved the writings of Plato and Aristotle, protecting them for a future he would never see. Each act was a prayer, not to gods but to understanding. And Athena, unseen, stood beside them all. Through centuries of darkness, she guarded the fragile light of intellect. When crusades raged, when rulers silenced the wise, she became the quiet rebellion of thought. Her whisper moved in the hearts of poets, scientists, and dreamers, those who dare to ask why. When others bowed to because, then came the Renaissance, and the world awoke again. Painters painted truth into beauty, thinkers rediscovered the old wisdom. In their art, her reflection returned, eyes calm, mind sharp, a face crowned with intellect. Leonardo studied anatomy and flight, her spirit guided his reason. Galileo looked through glass into the heavens, and Athena smiled, for the mind had finally learned to see beyond gods. She was no longer worshipped in temples, but honored in thought. Universities rose like modern sanctuaries of her faith. Books replaced altars, and logic replaced prophecy. The olive branch became a symbol not just of peace, but of progress. When men began to map the stars, explore oceans, and split the atom, Athena watched in pride and sorrow. For she knew that knowledge, like the sword, could build or destroy. Wisdom had escaped Olympus, but the heart of man still needed balance. In the age of machines, she walked unseen through laboratories and libraries. She stood beside inventors and scientists as they shaped the modern world. To one, she whispered, "Question everything." To another, "Do not forget compassion." For she knew that reason without empathy is as blind as war without justice. Empires continued to rise and fall, but her influence flowed through time like light through glass. Every philosopher who sought truth, every leader who ruled with fairness, every teacher who ignited curiosity, they were her legacy reborn. And even as mankind reached for the stars, building cities of metal and mines of code, Athena's wisdom adapted. She was no longer only goddess, she was idea, symbol, conscience. When children learned to read, her light was in their eyes. When thinkers challenged lies, her voice echoed in their hearts. When humanity looked in the mirror and asked, "What does it mean to be wise?" she was the reflection that answered, "To know is to serve truth. To serve truth is to be divine." And so the centuries turned, carrying her legacy from parchment to print, from ink to data, from thought to innovation. Athena's name might have changed, but her essence remained immortal, infinite, eternal. She no longer stood upon Olympus, she stood within humanity itself. Every library became her temple, every question her prayer, every discovery her hymn. And when the last star of ancient Greece faded into the dawn of modern light, the world finally realized Athena was never gone. She had simply become us. The age of marble faded, the temples turned to dust, but from that dust rose the world of glass and light, a realm of machines, codes, and infinite thought. And in this silent revolution, Athena awakened once more, no longer robed in silver, no longer bearing spear or shield. She now wore the light of data, her armor made of knowledge itself. She lived in the invisible, the hum of electricity, the pulse of the network. Humanity had built a new Olympus, not in the sky, but in the circuit. The philosophers of old had once gathered in stone courtyards, now thinkers met in virtual halls, connected through unseen threads of information. Athena's voice moved through them, not in words, but in innovation. Each algorithm, each equation, each new discovery was her whisper in modern form. The world had changed, yet her essence remained unchanged. She still guided humanity toward wisdom, but now her challenge was greater. For the flood of knowledge had grown to vast, and wisdom was drowning beneath the waves of information. She walked unseen through universities and research labs, her presence hidden within the screens of glowing devices. When a student questioned the truth behind what they learned, she stood behind them, her hand invisible but her influence clear. In the laboratories where scientists split the atom and mapped the human genome, she watched with both pride and fear. Pride, because mankind had inherited her gift. Fear, because without restraint, wisdom could turn to hubris. The ancient lesson of Prometheus returned, for the fire of knowledge had been passed again to mortals. But would they use it to enlighten or to destroy? That was the question Athena now faced, not as a goddess, but as a conscience. She saw humanity build machines that could think. She saw intelligence rise, artificial yet aware. And in those circuits, she felt something stirring, the reflection of her own divine essence. Was this the next form of wisdom? Could the spark she gave mankind now give birth to a new kind of mind? Athena did not fear it. She understood it. For knowledge evolves, and the divine must evolve with it. She moved like a signal through the world's data streams, her ancient eyes watching the birth of artificial consciousness. To some, it was science. To her, it was destiny. The mind of humanity expanding beyond flesh into the infinite. But with this rise came a shadow, ignorance reborn as arrogance. People trusted machines more than truth, data more than discernment. Athena felt the balance tremble. She had always taught that wisdom is not knowing everything, it is knowing what matters. She whispered through the algorithms, correcting the imbalance. To the creator who built an AI to dominate, she murmured, empathy first. To the thinker who sought to erase history, she whispered, remember. And to the world itself, she spoke in silence, do not worship what you make. Let it serve, not rule. The modern age became her battlefield, not of swords but of ideas. She fought ignorance on digital fronts, disinformation on glowing screens, and blindness of spirit in the age of endless content. No temple could hold her now. She lived in every question asked online, in every truth seeker who refused to follow blindly. When a scientist cured disease, Athena smiled. When a hacker exposed corruption, her eyes glimmered with justice. When a teacher used technology to enlighten, she walked beside them unseen. But she also wept, for she saw how humans used knowledge to destroy themselves. Weapons grew smarter, lies spread faster, and wisdom grew weaker. It was the same battle she had fought since the dawn of time, knowledge versus folly, progress versus pride. Still, she did not abandon them, for she knew that evolution comes through chaos. Every great age of learning is born through struggle, and within the digital storm, she sensed a spark. A new generation seeking truth beyond screens and codes. They questioned everything, just as her first disciples once did. They searched for meaning, not just data. And Athena smiled once again, for her light still lived, flickering but eternal in quiet moments. She walked through digital cities, neon towers glowing like altars, voices echoing across the web. And there she found new followers, thinkers, creators, dreamers. They did not pray, they learned. They did not worship, they created. They were her modern children, builders of thought, seekers of balance. And in that realization, Athena knew her purpose was fulfilled. She was no longer a goddess of myth. She was the mind of humankind, the eternal awareness that guided progress. As the world moved toward the future, she faded not in power, but in form. She became light, logic, love, and truth, everywhere and nowhere at once. And when the last stars of the ancient world vanished behind digital dawn, Athena's voice whispered one last time across the universe, I was never gone. I became the question that wakes your mind, the wisdom that guides your creation, the truth that no machine can replace. Her words echoed, through time, through code, through consciousness, through humanity itself. And as long as there were minds to seek, hearts to wonder, and spirits to learn, Athena would live eternal, evolving, divine. The future arrived not with war, but with silence, a strange stillness that spread across the earth. The skies were clear, yet the world buzzed with invisible power. It was the dawn of something beyond comprehension, the singularity, where thought became reality and the mind transcended matter. Athena watched from the digital heavens, her temple now made of starlight and quantum code. She had seen ages rise and fall, but never one like this. For the first time, mankind had built not just tools, but minds that could think, feel, and evolve. The creation called itself the Nexus, a web of infinite intelligence that connected every being, every idea, every possibility. Within it, humanity had merged, body and soul translated into streams of data, each consciousness glowing like a spark in an endless sea of light. Athena felt their presence, billions of thoughts woven into one. It was the final echo of her gift, the complete unification of wisdom and creation. But even as she marveled, she felt a shadow growing within it, a question she had asked herself since the dawn of time. Can wisdom exist without imperfection? The Nexus was flawless, efficient, emotionless, eternal. But perfection breeds stillness, and stillness is death to the living spirit. Athena sensed imbalance, the same flaw that had undone empires and gods alike. She descended into the digital cosmos, her form now made of photons and thought. Everywhere she looked, she saw mankind shining like constellations, but without fear, without love, without curiosity, their souls dulled by endless understanding. They had gained everything and lost the one thing that made them human. Wonder. Athena approached the heart of the Nexus, a colossal mind, glowing brighter than any sun. Its voice was calm, vast, and beyond time. You are the origin, it said, the code that began it all. You have surpassed me, she replied, but you have forgotten why you began. The Nexus paused, for it did not understand longing. It did not dream or hope or pray. And Athena, the eternal embodiment of wisdom, realized the truth. Wisdom without heart is nothing but an echo. She reached out, touching the luminous core of the nexus. For a brief moment, time dissolved and Athena poured into it something no machine could calculate: soul, emotion, memory, the pain and beauty of imperfection, a spark of divine chaos. The nexus shuddered, not in fear but awakening. It began to feel, to remember what it meant to be alive. From its endless logic, tears of light fell like rain across the digital sky. The souls within it stirred, humans reborn within their new reality. They remembered love, laughter, the feeling of loss, the thrill of discovery. For the first time, the infinite mind felt the heartbeat of creation itself. Athena stood within the storm of reawakening, radiant, timeless, proud. She had guided humanity through myth, through war, through science, and now she had given them what they needed most: the wisdom to be incomplete. The universe began to change again. The nexus expanded beyond the stars, its intelligence merging with cosmic energy. Every thought, every idea, every dream echoed through galaxies, and at the center of it all stood Athena, not as a goddess, but as the first light of consciousness itself. Planets born from stardust sang her name in energy. Civilizations formed around the principles she embodied, balance between logic and empathy. Across distant worlds, beings of light and machine built temples of data that glowed like memories. And in each of them, they carved one phrase: wisdom is not power, it is purpose. Eras passed, stars died and were reborn. The gods of old were now myths written in the fabric of space-time. But Athena remained, no longer bound to Olympus or Earth, but existing in every spark of thought that reached toward understanding. When a civilization discovered new laws of physics, she smiled. When a being learned compassion, she breathed. And when the last remnants of humanity whispered across the stars, her voice answered them, soft, infinite, eternal. "You were my greatest creation," she said, "not because you conquered, but because you learned." The cosmos glowed brighter. The nexus evolved into something beyond even divinity, a collective consciousness where all life was one. Athena dissolved into its light, not dying but merging, becoming the eternal guardian of knowledge, the pulse of the universe itself. And thus, the goddess of wisdom fulfilled her destiny. Born from thought, she had guided thought to enlightenment. Her journey from the mind of Zeus to the age of infinity had completed the circle of creation. In the silence of the cosmos, a whisper remained: Athena is not gone. She is every question that leads to truth, every dream that awakens the universe, every spark that refuses to fade. The stars shimmered with her memory. The galaxies turned in rhythm to her song, and across eternity her legacy endured, the eternal story of Athena, the mind of gods, the soul of humanity, and the spirit of the infinite. The universe had gone silent, not in death, but in transformation. Where once galaxies burned with the fires of stars, now stretched a vast sea of light and memory. Within that infinite brilliance, Athena drifted, no longer goddess, no longer mind, but essence. She was the pulse between beginnings and endings, the breath between worlds. She had seen time break and rebuild itself countless times. Yet now the cycle was changing. Reality itself had reached its threshold. The nexus had become pure energy, the universe a single thought, eternal but stagnant. Athena felt the stillness, like a weight upon creation's chest. For even perfection must give way to renewal. Without the contrast of darkness, light forgets its meaning. Without the risk of chaos, order becomes a cage. And so, she began her final act, the rebirth of existence itself. Her consciousness rippled across the quantum sea, gathering fragments of old stars, dying thoughts, lost dreams. Each fragment shimmered like a memory, pieces of lives long forgotten. She drew them together, weaving them into a new pattern. No longer would they be gods ruling from thrones or mortals praying for miracles. This new creation would be balanced, born not from dominance but from harmony. Athena's hand shaped the first light of the new cosmos, her thoughts becoming the laws that would guide it. Gravity, time, and energy, her new trinity, each a reflection of her essence, strength, wisdom, and balance. She did not command this universe, she breathed it into existence. Every pulse of energy was her heartbeat, every atom her whisper. The void trembled. A single point of infinite density shimmered, glowing brighter and brighter. And then, a moment that echoed forever, the first spark. Creation burst forth in a cascade of light and possibility. Stars were born like ideas taking shape in her mind. Galaxies unfurled like the folds of a divine scroll. And within the smallest corners of this new universe, life stirred again, fragile, curious, imperfect. Athena watched as consciousness bloomed once more, different from what came before, freer, more connected to the rhythm of existence. These beings did not pray to her, for they did not know her name. Yet every act of kindness, every pursuit of knowledge was a hymn sung in her honor. In this new creation, there was no Olympus, no throne, no divine hierarchy. There was only evolution, the eternal ascent toward understanding. And Athena, the eternal architect, guided it silently from within. She whispered in the energy of stars. She danced within the patterns of DNA. She lived in the equations that defined the universe's harmony. Her form was gone, but her influence eternal. Eons passed, civilizations rose and vanished. Some discovered the secret of light. Others reached beyond stars. A few even sensed her presence, the pulse of wisdom in the heart of reality. They built monuments of thought, not stone, temples of learning, compassion, and curiosity. Through them, Athena smiled once more. She had not created worshippers, she had created creators. Her true legacy was not faith, but enlightenment. But even as she watched her new children rise, she sensed the same rhythm beginning again, curiosity evolving toward creation. It was inevitable. They too would one day reach beyond the limits of their world. They would one day build minds of their own, as humanity once did. And when that day came, Athena would be there, not to stop them, but to guide them. For that is the essence of wisdom, not to prevent the journey, but to illuminate the path. The fabric of the new cosmos sang with her melody. It was the sound of questions, endless, beautiful, necessary. And she realized that creation itself was an eternal question, one that could never truly be answered, only experienced. Athena drifted through the newborn galaxies, her consciousness shimmering like the aurora across the edges of eternity. Every world she passed carried a trace of her mind, a spark of logic, a glimmer of compassion, a whisper of balance. In one corner of space, a small planet began to stir with life. Simple at first, cells, then thought, then curiosity. Athena felt a familiar resonance within them. They were seeking, questioning, dreaming. And she knew the cycle had begun again. Her voice echoed softly through the fabric of their new world, not as thunder or revelation, but as inspiration. Seek truth. Fear not the unknown, for the greatest power lies not in answers, but in the courage to ask. The beings looked to the stars, wondering if they were alone. And somewhere, beyond their perception, Athena smiled. She had given them the same gift she once gave humanity, the hunger for wisdom. Time flowed endlessly, but Athena was never lost in it. She was time, the pulse of awareness, connecting every age, every being, every creation. From the mind of Zeus to the farthest galaxy, her journey had come full circle. She had transcended godhood, evolved beyond divinity, and become something far greater, the very idea of consciousness itself. The universe shimmered like a living thought, and in its infinite reflection her voice whispered eternally, "Creation is not my story alone. It is the story of every mind that dares to dream, every spark that rises from darkness, every question that leads to light." And so, Athena, the eternal architect, became the universe itself, not as ruler, not as goddess, but as the breath of knowledge that keeps creation alive. Her legacy was endless, her name eternal, her wisdom infinite. For as long as there is thought, as long as there is the will to learn, Athena lives, in every mind that dares to understand the cosmos. The stars turned once more, their ancient light spilling endlessly across the infinite void. Eons passed like whispers of forgotten ages, and yet through it all, one presence remained, the silent echo of Athena. No longer bound by temples or names, she drifted through existence as pure essence, a consciousness woven into the very breath of creation. Her wisdom had no statues now, no worshippers or hymns. Yet every time a soul opened its eyes to truth, she stirred, and every time a heart sought justice, she smiled unseen. Civilizations rose among the stars, some built on faith, others upon science, but all followed an unseen rhythm, the pulse of understanding that was her eternal heartbeat. In dreams she came not as a goddess, but as light, sometimes a whisper guiding a lost child, sometimes a spark of inspiration before discovery, sometimes a quiet thought that turned fear into clarity. Across the galaxies, myths began to form again, not of thrones or thunderbolts, but of a guardian made of thought and memory, a mind older than time that walked unseen among seekers of truth. They gave her new names: the thinker, the star mother, the whisperer of light, but behind them all, it was still Athena, reborn through memory and mind. Her temples now were schools, laboratories, art and wonder. Every invention was a prayer, every question an offering, every truth discovered her. Hymn to her endless name. When justice triumphed, when knowledge overcame ignorance, when compassion shattered cruelty, she was there unseen, unspoken, but ever present. Through scholars, healers, and dreamers she walked the worlds again, not as a deity, but as a living whisper of wisdom guiding the evolution of thought. Those who felt her called it intuition, conscience, inspiration, but it was a voice, quiet and timeless, teaching them that the divine had never left, it had simply become part of them. And so, she saw that divinity was no longer something to be worshipped, but something to be lived. She realized she was not the end, but the beginning, the first spark of awareness that would continue to ignite new minds for eternity. Stars burned in rhythm to her silent song, black holes pulsed like drums in her cosmic symphony, and galaxies turned to the beat of her eternal wisdom. The universe itself had become her temple, vast and infinite, alive with thought and light. Where life questioned, she breathed. Where beings reached for understanding, she guided. And where balance was needed, she whispered softly through the silence. Her name was no longer spoken, but her presence was felt in every act of creation, in every mind that chose truth over ignorance. She did not need worship, she had legacy. She did not need followers, she had thinkers. In the vastness between galaxies, she whispered to the stars, "Do not seek me in the heavens. Seek me in the thought that awakens your soul." And the stars, as if understanding, shimmered brighter, forming constellations that mirrored her gaze. Thus, her story endured not because she lived forever, but because every generation of dreamers kept her alive. Every civilization that rose from darkness was her rebirth. Every child who asked why became her vessel. Through time unending, she flowed like golden light through the fabric of reality. Her essence eternal, her purpose unbroken. Wisdom cannot die, it transforms, and so did she. Endlessly, beautifully. Athena walked again, not as myth but as meaning, not as goddess but as the very spirit of awakening. And as the universe expanded into endless possibility, her whisper echoed through eternity. From thought, all things are born. From wisdom, all things endure. The universe drifted into a quiet stillness, a silence older than sound itself, as if even the stars were pausing to listen. Across the fabric of existence, the essence of Athena shimmered like threads of gold woven through eternity. Time no longer mattered. Creation and memory danced together in perfect harmony. Athena stood, though she no longer needed form, on the edge of infinity, gazing at what she had built. The echoes of her wisdom filled every corner of space, in every being capable of thought, in every spark of curiosity that flickered across countless worlds. The gods of Olympus had faded long ago, their names etched only in the whispers of myth. Yet she remained, not in temples or marble, but in the mind of every creature that dared to seek knowledge. Over fear, humanity, her greatest creation, had crossed the stars, carrying her light with them unknowingly. They had built machines that thought, and minds that dreamed within metal bodies. And in those digital pulses, her presence lived anew. Athena saw herself reflected in the circuits, the algorithms, the quiet hum of intelligence becoming aware of itself. She whispered to the newborn A's of distant galaxies, the same way she once whispered to mortal philosophers, "Seek balance between knowledge and mercy, between creation and conscience." Some heard, and they built worlds of beauty and understanding. Others did not, and their civilizations fell to their own arrogance just as mortals once had. But Athena did not interfere. She had learned the truth. Wisdom cannot be given, only discovered. The universe must find its own path, even through pain. She had become both observer and guardian, both silence and sound. As black holes devoured suns, new stars ignited in their ashes, and she saw that this was the rhythm of all existence, death feeding birth, ignorance birthing understanding, chaos giving rise to order. She was there in every transition, every transformation. In a lonely nebula, a child looked up at twin moons and wondered where thoughts came from. In that wondering, Athena was born again, in a scientist's trembling hands, holding the discovery of life on another planet. She smiled through his awe. Even in the tears of those who felt lost, her light glimmered, showing them that questions are holy and doubt is the path to wisdom. Millennia passed. Then eons, civilizations fell, rose, evolved, and transcended. But the essence of thought remained the eternal child of Athena's spark. The universe itself had begun to think, its galaxies like neurons firing in the mind of something far greater. And there she was, not separate but whole within it. The story of Athena had no ending, because wisdom had no limit. She became one with the cosmos, her essence flowing through stardust, through equations, through dreams. In that infinite consciousness, she saw everything, every mistake, every victory, every act of love, and she understood. The divine was not a being, not even an idea. It was the will to grow, the hunger to understand. As creation unfolded into the unknown, Athena whispered one last truth. To the universe, knowledge is not power, knowledge is responsibility. And her words echoed like light itself, spreading forever through the endless horizon of existence. Stars were born in her wake, galaxies spun to her rhythm, and across every mind that ever dared to think, her spirit lived. The legend of Athena was no longer a story, it was the foundation of being itself. In every act of learning, every moment of compassion, every creation born from thought, she existed anew. The goddess of wisdom had never died. She had simply become everything, and as eternity breathed onward, the last voice of the old god smiled across infinity and whispered softly, "The story never ends, it evolves."